The first time I realized the HOA wasn't just petty, but potentially criminal, was when they fined me $700 for fishing. Not for fishing out of season, not for breaking any posted rule. No, just fishing in the lake right behind my house that I was told was a shared neighborhood amenity. $700 for catching a bass. And here's the real kicker. When I asked for the regulation I supposedly broke, they handed me a Word doc with no date, no signatures, no legal backing, just bold red text that said, "Fine issued, $700, unauthorized use of lakefront access." That was the moment I knew this wasn't about rules, this was about power. And Bethany Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the HOA board, had finally gone too far. So I did what any rational, slightly unhinged Navy veteran would do. I bought the damn lake. Now listen, I don't say this lightly. I've seen bureaucracy, control freaks, and power-drunk supervisors in the military. But nothing prepared me for the HOA warfare in Willowbrook Estates. They smiled in your face and stabbed your property value with backroom policy votes. The lake was the community's gem, a 12-acre spread of glassy peace. But here's the dirty secret. The HOA never actually owned it. It was technically under a county designation as recreational wetland with private easement. And one quiet Thursday, when Bethany and her clipboard brigade were busy measuring mailbox heights, I discovered the county had listed it for auction. Back taxes unpaid. Minimum bid, $47,000. I paid it on the spot. Signed, sealed. And within 48 hours, posted a brand new sign. Private property, no trespassing. Owner, Dalton Reeves. You should have seen Bethany's face when she stepped out in her designer flats, latte in hand, and found a no trespassing sign stuck in the beach gravel like a dagger. She marched across my property line like she owned gravity, screaming about invalid sales and legal missteps. I calmly handed her a copy of the deed. "You fined me for fishing," I said. "Now none of you fish." Boom! Her voice cracked as she stammered something about board review and emergency protocols, but the lake? It was mine now, all of it. And for the first time since my wife Miranda passed, I laughed, like full-body, soul-cleansing laughter. Because justice in suburbia doesn't come easy. But when it does, oh, it tastes better than any fish you could ever catch. The fallout was immediate and glorious. Bethany Whitmore did what any power-hungry HOA president would do when her empire crumbled overnight. She panicked. Sent out an urgent community bulletin at 6:47 a.m. subject line. Unauthorized lake seizure, immediate legal action pending. Unauthorized seizure? Lady, I bought the lake, legally, at a public auction, with funds from Miranda's life insurance, the same money I was planning to use to remodel the kitchen until Bethany decided to fine a grieving man for feeding ducks. By 8 a.m., her minions were on my property line, measuring bushes, taking photos, pointing their phones at my dock like it was a crime scene. I stayed calm, sat in my lawn chair, coffee in hand, fishing pole untouched. Because here's the thing about people like Bethany, they thrive on reaction. They want you to yell, to lose your cool, to fight back with noise, but I fought with silence, and paperwork, and 100% lawful property rights. And you could see the gears grinding in her eyes. He's not backing down, he's not flinching. What do I do now? That's when the rumors started. He's unstable. He's got PTSD. He threatened the HOA board. I heard whispers at the grocery store. Saw curtains twitch when I walked my dog. My neighbors, once friendly, now crossed the street. Except the real ones, Mrs. Kowalski with her warm pea, rogues and sharper tongue than a lawyer in court. The Hendersons with their 3 kids who used to swim in the lake and now stared at it like it was haunted. "You did the right thing," Mrs. K told me one morning. "You just did it too smart for them to handle." And maybe she was right. Because Bethany wasn't just mad, I was watching her unravel. She escalated faster than a toddler denied snacks. New signs went up. HOA controlled zone. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Security cameras popped up overnight. She even hired a retired mall cop, Carl, to patrol the lakefront perimeter. Carl, who used to wave at me while driving his golf cart, now avoided eye contact and took notes when I sneezed. So I decided to escalate too, but with class. I printed glossy copies of the lake deed and mailed one to every homeowner with a handwritten note. "You're welcome to enjoy the view, just not the water." I signed it, "With love, your friendly neighborhood lake owner." And on the back, I circled a clause in the original HOA charter. Common area used subject to ownership. No king in the cul-de-sac, huh? That's right. Let's make it official, folks. Drop it in the comments right now. No king in the cul-de-sac. Twice. So they never forget. 3 days later, Bethany called an emergency HOA meeting. Not that it mattered. She never had the numbers for quorum, but that didn't stop her from playing dictator in designer shoes. I showed up just to watch. And let me tell you, it was a spectacle. Picture this: a dimly lit clubhouse, folding chairs, 2 elderly board members blinking through bifocals, and Bethany at the front like a general preparing for war, complete with color-coded binders and an iPad she didn't know how to use. "This is not about power," she announced, pacing like a caged tiger. "This is about order." She claimed my lake purchase was a strategic threat to community harmony. I nearly choked on my thermos coffee. Strategic threat? What is this, suburban NATO? I raised my hand. "Bethany, could you clarify what clause in the HOA bylaws prohibits private citizens from purchasing available land through a public auction?" Dead silence. She blinked, once, twice, then shot back. "That's irrelevant. What matters is intent, and yours is clearly malicious." I grinned. My intent was to fish. Her jaw clicked shut like a bear trap. But the real bomb dropped when I handed out copies of the county purchase record. 1 for every board member, 1 for the community bulletin board, 1 for the HOA newsletter printer. Full transparency. Page 3? It included an annotated map showing lake ownership boundaries, which now included the footpath the HOA had paved for community lake access. Yup, that path ran directly through my new property, and suddenly everyone realized they'd been trespassing. For years. Bethany turned the color of microwaved beet soup. The fallout spread like wildfire. Carl, the security guard, quit on the spot. "I'm not getting in the middle of this." Bob Martinez, board treasurer and lifelong fence sitter, told me quietly in the parking lot, "I just wanted cheaper lawn maintenance, man." And Janet Anderson, bless her heart, looked ready to nominate me for mayor. "Dalton," she said, holding her printed copy of the deed, "I didn't even know this was possible." "Oh, it's possible," I said, "and it's legal. The question now is, what's next?" Bethany did what all tyrants do when their walls start crumbling. She retaliated. The next morning, I got 3 code violations in my mailbox. 1 for outdated paint trim, 1 for unapproved lawn ornaments, a bird bath for God's sake, and 1 for suspicious activity, which apparently meant sitting quietly by the lake with a sandwich. That's when I knew she wasn't done. But neither was I. Let me paint the next scene for you. It's a foggy Thursday morning, the kind where the lake mist rolls in low, brushing the grass like ghosts of neighborhood peace. I'm sitting on my usual folding chair, tackle box beside me, coffee in hand, thermos still warm. Bethany steps out of her house like a suburban SWAT commander. Clipboard, sunglasses, a scarf that screams, aspiring dictator of the year. She marches straight toward my property line, heels crunching gravel with militant precision, and points at my feet. "You're in violation again, Mr. Reeves. Your chair is obstructing emergency lakefront access." I raised an eyebrow. "Emergency access? To my lake?" "Exactly," she hisses. "In case of fire or flood. There's no dock, no gate, and no emergency signage. You want me to move my coffee for a hypothetical flood?" She storms off, muttering about legal escalation. That afternoon, I get another violation slip. This time, non-conforming recreational behavior. I swear you'd think I was performing satanic rituals instead of fishing. But it's not about rules anymore. It's about making my life miserable. And to her credit, Bethany was very committed to the cause. But here's where things start shifting in my favor. The Henderson kids, bless them, show up with a hand-drawn picture of me fishing. Crayon sky, big sun, my beard looking more like a spaghetti monster, but hey, artistic license. Their mom hands me a homemade lemon loaf and whispers, "We're with you." Then Mr. Patel from down the block, he walks over holding 2 HOA violation letters, one for leaving his porch light on past 11 p.m., the other for a hummingbird feeder. "A feeder," he says. "They think sugar water is a threat to the neighborhood?" One by one, they started sharing their stories. The quiet accountant, the widow, the couple who just wanted to grow tomatoes without an HOA permit. It was a slow groundswell, but it was real. So I launched Operation Spotlight. I built a website, Willowbrook Watchdog.com, and posted every violation, every memo, every HOA meeting recording, with timestamps, with receipts, with evidence. I titled it, Rules for thee, not for me. A lakefront HOA power trip. Within 48 hours, the page had over 3,000 visits. Bethany sent a cease and desist letter via email full of typos and legal nonsense. I forwarded it to Marcus, my lawyer. His reply? Print it out, frame it. We're going to need that. The war wasn't just on my dock anymore. It was online, in inboxes, on doorsteps. Bethany had declared war on her own community, and now the community was waking up. Bethany thought she still had the upper hand, until the county envelope arrived. Certified mail. Official seal. A formal response to my complaint. Inside, a letter from the County Property Oversight Board stating they'd initiated a full audit of Willowbrook Estates HOA due to repeated allegations of financial mismanagement, abuse of authority, and retaliatory governance. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of a searchlight turning on in a room full of cockroaches. That same day, I printed 10 copies and handed them out like birthday invitations to the neighbors she'd bullied. Mrs. Kowalski clutched it to her chest like it was a Christmas miracle. Bob Martinez nearly fainted when he realized the audit would include Bethany's brother-in-law's $18,000 security contract. And Bethany? She doubled down again, because when power-hungry people feel the walls closing in, they don't admit defeat. They go nuclear. That's when the smear campaign kicked into overdrive. Flyers appeared on neighborhood doors overnight, cheap black and white prints warning of a rogue homeowner threatening HOA unity. The flyer had a blurry photo of me, yes, fishing, and the phrase "disturbance to community order" in all caps. Like I was some kind of domestic terrorist with a worm hook. Kids laughed, adults cringed, and Bethany? She strutted around like she'd just dropped Watergate. But here's the thing she forgot. I'm Navy. I plan. I adapt. I document. And I was already 3 steps ahead. I filed a Freedom of Information request for all public documents, the HOA sub-M, dated in the last 5 years, meeting minutes, budget allocations, contracts, permits. Within a week, a flash drive arrived. You know what I found? Over $9,000 in landscaping fees for a community beautification project that only improved the front of Bethany's house. A $2,500 payment to a consulting firm that, wait for it, was registered under her sister's name. A reimbursed expense of $147.32 for board luncheon strategy session at a restaurant that didn't exist anymore. It was all there, sloppy, obvious, arrogant. I handed the flash drive to Marcus and his eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. "She's toast," he whispered. "Do you want this to end with a settlement or headlines?" "Headlines," I said. "Let the whole zip code know exactly who they've been living under." Because here's what Bethany never understood. When you push decent people too far, they don't break. They rise. The next chapter in the Willowbrook War wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposure, truth, pulling the rotting insulation off the walls and showing the whole neighborhood what was festering underneath Bethany's designer HOA regime. So I dropped the bomb. With Marcus's help, I filed a formal civil complaint with the county court, not just for harassment, but for intentional infliction of emotional distress, misuse of HOA funds, abuse of authority, and unlawful attempts to publicly defame a private citizen. It was detailed, precise, and yes, backed by video, time-stamped violations, public records, and that glorious little flash drive. The complaint hit like a thunderclap. Bethany didn't see it coming. She thought I'd stay quiet. Or maybe I'd crumble. Instead, the court date was scheduled, and suddenly this was real. Not a neighborhood spat, not a passive-aggressive email thread, but a public legal proceeding. The residents of Willowbrook Estates were about to find out just how corrupt their queen really was. That weekend, I noticed something different. Neighbors started waving again. Mr. Patel left. A pie on my doorstep. The Henderson kids drew new sidewalk chalk messages in front of Bethany's house that said, "Fishing is not a crime." And Mrs. Kowalski? She walked past my dock with a tray of pierogies and declared, "The revolution will be catered." But Bethany still had one last play, and it was ugly. She tried to flip the narrative with what she called a mental wellness petition. It was a thinly veiled attempt to gather signatures to request a psychological evaluation of me, claiming I'd become erratic, uncooperative, and potentially unsafe to the community. It was ludicrous, and everyone knew it. But that's the thing about fear. It makes people dangerous. Bethany knew her grip was slipping. Her allies were defecting. Even Janet, her once loyal board VP, told me privately, "I didn't sign that petition, I burned it." Still, the petition existed, and legally it meant something, so I played my final card. At the next open HOA meeting, held in the same cramped clubhouse where this madness started, I arrived with Marcus and a portable speaker. I played a 43-second recording of Jimmy, the part-time security kid, quietly describing how Bethany coached him to write fake reports. She wants me to say Mr. Reeves was intimidating, like just for opening a tackle box. Gasps. One neighbor cursed out loud. Bethany tried to cut in, but it was too late. I dropped the flash drive on the table like a mic. Evidence. All of it. She stood there, red-faced and twitching, while neighbors she'd ruled for years looked at her like a stranger, like the mask had finally come off. And just like that, the tide turned. Bethany didn't show her face for 3 days after that meeting. Her SUV stayed parked, curtains drawn, porch light off. The queen of cul-de-sac compliance had gone dark. And the neighborhood? It breathed. You could feel it. In the open garage doors, the spontaneous sidewalk chats, kids skating freely again without clipboard, Karen counting rotations like a probation officer. But let me tell you how this ends, because you won't believe it. 2 weeks before the court date, I got a letter in the mail, an official settlement offer from the HOA's attorney. They were offering to drop all fines, retract all violations, and issue a public apology in the HOA newsletter if I agreed to relinquish ownership of the lake and drop my harassment complaint. I laughed so hard I dropped my coffee. Let me explain something for anyone watching who's ever dealt with an HOA. That lake wasn't just water. It was peace, power. A line drawn in the mulch of petty rules and poison pen notices. I wasn't giving that up. Not for an apology, not for a check, not for anything. So I rejected the offer, politely. And then I did something even better. I sent my own counteroffer. I would consider dropping the lawsuit only if Bethany Whitmore resigned from the HOA board, forfeited any future board eligibility, and signed a community affidavit admitting to financial misconduct and personal retaliation. I gave them 48 hours. No response. Day 3, Bethany's Escalade was gone. Word spread quick. She'd moved out, left her gardenias, her power, her little HOA throne, and vanished like a dictator whose statues were just pulled down. A week later, the HOA held an emergency election. Janet Anderson stepped in as interim president. Her first act? Voiding all fishing fines and formally declaring the lake a private property not under HOA jurisdiction. We laminated that memo and taped it to the new lake sign. Welcome to Reeves Pond, by invitation only. And here's the kicker. With Bethany gone, the neighborhood finally started healing. We held a block party. Kids fished from my dock. Mrs. Kowalski slow danced with Bob Martinez to a Glenn Miller record. The HOA newsletter's next issue had a new header. Community Voices First. And me? I sat on my dock, same chair, same thermos, same sunrise. But this time with friends, with peace. Peace. And a view that didn't just say freedom, it screamed, "No king in the cul-de-sac." Say it again in the comments if you're still with me. No king in the cul-de-sac. No king in the cul-de-sac. Because justice in suburbia? Sometimes it looks like a fishing pole, a paper trail, and a veteran with time on his hands. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But mine? It was slow roasted. Smoked over early morning mist. Served with a side of legal documentation and sweet community applause. By the time the court date arrived, it was ceremonial. Bethany never showed. Her lawyer came instead, nervous, underdressed, clearly not briefed well enough on just how airtight our case was. Marcus and I arrived calm, deliberate. He carried a sleek black folder. I brought the thermos. The judge glanced at the file, skimmed the harassment timeline, the misuse of funds, the audio files, the violation letters, the photos of her measuring bird feeders. His words burned into my brain. This case speaks for itself. The plaintiff is advised to pursue civil damages through small claims court if desired. But this matter of harassment from the evidence presented appears not only credible but alarming. I am formally ordering the HOA to cease and desist all enforcement activity toward Mr. Reeves regarding lake access and associated violations. In other words, case closed. The gavel hit like thunder. Marcus shook my hand. And outside the courthouse, 3 neighbors were waiting with a folding chair, a paper sign that read Reeves Pond Forever, and a thermos of their own. We laughed, we toasted. I'm not ashamed, I teared up. Back in Willowbrook, things changed fast. The HOA board was completely restructured. Janet stayed on as president, but this time they did it right. Committees, transparency, no secret votes in dark basements. And my little website, willowbrookwatchdog.com, it turned into a hub for local homeowners to learn their rights, share resources, and yes, post their own HOA horror stories. One guy in Arizona emailed me saying, "You inspired me to fight back when they fined me for my wheelchair ramp." Another from Florida, "We printed your lake deed and showed it to our board. They backed down instantly." And that's when I realized this wasn't just my fight, it was ours. Because HOAs can be helpful, but in the wrong hands, they're little regimes backed by petty tyrants with overpriced printers and unchecked egos, and the only way they win is if we stay silent, compliant, apathetic. But not anymore. Now every time I fish from Reeves Pond, I bring 2 extra chairs. One for whoever stops by, and one just to let Bethany know she's still invited. To sit down, sip some humble coffee, and reflect on how power doesn't come from clipboards or rules. It comes from community. You want to be a good neighbor? Start by being a better human. It's been 14 months since Bethany vanished from Willowbrook, and the lake has never been quieter. Not because no one uses it, quite the opposite. Kids cast lines at sunset, neighbors hold morning yoga on the shore. Mr. Patel built a little bench by the cattails with his daughter's name etched in the wood. But the quiet I'm talking about is different. It's the kind that settles in after a storm. The kind that says, "You're safe now." But sometimes when the sun's low and the air carries the scent of wet grass and old memories, I think about what all of this cost. Not money, though lawsuits, paperwork, late nights, they all add up. No, I'm talking about grief. Because when my wife passed, I moved here hoping to escape chaos, not start a war over lake access. I just wanted a quiet place to grieve, to heal. Instead, I ended up becoming something I never asked to be, a symbol. And that's what no one tells you about fighting back. It doesn't give you your old life back. It gives you something else. New roots, new allies, a stronger voice, and the unshakable knowledge that you're not alone. Not now, not ever again. Bethany tried to isolate me. She thought the HOA gave her power. But real power, it came from an 82-year-old woman with a pan of pierogies, from a teenager who refused to lie, from neighbors who dared to remember what this place used to feel like before fear crept in through the bylaws. You want to know the funniest part? That woman who fined me $700 for fishing, who tried to paint me as unstable, who thought the lake was her personal chessboard, she still drives by sometimes, not often, maybe once every few months, slows down just enough to glance across the water, to see the new sign at the dock entrance. "Welcome to Reeves Pond. Community is stronger than control." Sometimes I wave. Not to gloat, but to remind her that she lost the moment she tried to take peace away from a man who had already lost everything, and decided, instead of breaking, he'd build something better. So if you're watching this, sitting in your kitchen, with your 3rd HOA violation in 1 week, wondering if you should fight, here's your answer. No king in the cul-de-sac. No queen either. Just neighbors. Just rights. Just the courage to say, "Not today, clipboard." Now drop that in the comments, "No king in the cul-de-sac," and tag the neighbor who needs to hear it. Because someone's peace depends on it. And peace is always worth fighting for.